and welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Pascal, and on the other end, it is Steve. This time we are doing a double episode because next week I will be on holiday on a snowboarding trip down the slope.
How dare you?
With explosions in the background, like Triple X. Do you remember that movie? Vin Diesel, Triple X? Yeah. Where there's like explosion in the background and then going down the mountains with an avalanche chasing him. That's the way that you can imagine me doing things as well. So that's why we are actually doing then a double episode this time. So don't be surprised if next week we basically look the same again and we're just like touching on the same things.
So like, guys, hey, Steve, you didn't change your outfit at all for a week.
Yeah.
You're wearing the same thing.
And you still have that, what is it, that spot on your t-shirt as well there.
I don't know. I saw this as I was doing check-ins. I was like, this is a clean t-shirt from today. Where did that spot come from? I can only imagine either it's like, I think it might be some of the like, what's it called? The tattoo butter that I'd been putting on my tattoo and it like got onto here. So it's like, fuck.
And I was thinking that maybe it is the new CNP whey isolate that you're trying or using, that mint chocolate. How is it? I mean, you're now sponsored by CNP. You can't really give them shit.
It's the best thing I've ever tried in my life. I mean, it's a whey isolate. So it's whey isolate. They do put a few more companies have been doing this where they put this thing called like lacto. I think it's I've forgotten what it's called. Basically, it's a digestive enzyme that helps with uptake of amino acids. So quite a few products have been putting this sort of thing in, which is quite cool.
Really?
But yeah, tastes decent, tastes fine. It's not like the best tasting shake I've ever had. Definitely not the worst thing I've ever had. I only had it with water, so tasting fine with water. You know, protein shakes are never the best with water. What I was glad is it mixed like completely. You expect that, especially from like a whey isolate. You don't want it to be clumpy. So yeah, it was decent enough. I like chocolate mint. I don't think you're a fan of mint and chocolate, are you?
No, not at all. It's also weird. I'm also not a fan of coffee taste as well. Even though that I love espresso. Like,
I love a coffee, like chocolate coffee or any coffee, like protein-y thing.
I find it awful, to be honest.
I like it.
This is really nothing for me. I don't know why. But same goes then for like mint chocolate or fruity chocolate mixes or blends as well, except for banana. Banana is the only thing I find tastes well with chocolate, sometimes even strawberry, but even this is like right on the edge. Everything else is just like, ooh, that's not for me.
What about chocolate and nut?
It like sounds amazing. So my experience is when it comes to whey shakes or just like whey powders and all that kind of stuff, it sounds amazing. Like double peanut butter brownie mix or so. Then you buy it, and it already smells awful. And when you then taste it, it's like, this is not double peanut butter brownie mix. This is like, I don't know, feed.
Some companies can't do it at all, but some can nail their flavors. I have had some really good, like, I think it was from like PhD. I think they have like a smart protein. It was like Reese's Cup. Peanut butter one. That was really good. So some companies can really nail it, but like you said, some completely ruin it. And so you just go to your old favorite of just chocolate.
Yeah.
You can't fuck chocolate up too much.
Have you, because there was a time where My Protein and also all the other bigger companies such as Bulk, they were having kind of production issues due to supply shock. And that's why the price was actually 200% above the normal price. Have you checked it recently? Is it back to normal, or is it still like outrageously high?
I haven't checked because I was talking to, interestingly enough, I was talking to Greg Potter about kind of veganism and things like this because he, you know, Greg, he thinks about things a lot. So I was interested because I was like, I know he'll have thought about veganism. So he was saying actually a whey protein is just a waste from like the dairy industry. So it's quite like if you're switching your protein powder from whey to like plant-based ones, it's maybe not having the biggest impact. Like, sure, it's an improvement. So he was just like, typically it's that. So then I was like, well, the prices have been going up wildly. So I'm not sure. So anyway, I have no answer for you because I haven't actually checked the prices. I don't even keep a good enough eye on like prices of the protein like well enough. But I suppose if it
neither did I. It was just like so shocking when I think it's now 3 months ago or so. When I was actually going over to my protein, I wanted to order my usual kind of protein powder, and it was like 150 euros. And I was like, this is not what it's normally like. I normally actually get it for like 50 for a 5 kilogram pack, right? And I was just like, what's going on here? And then Matty Pipes, he's a former client of mine, and he's working in the supplement industry. And he then told me about like supply chain issues, and that's why most of the bigger companies actually have it at such a high price, because they don't have the protein there and they are running short on it. And I don't know whether the situation got any better, because there are still so many industries where they are experiencing still some supply chain issues as well, like the car industry, for example. Big time.
Yeah, I imagine. So Greg's point would still stand. It's just, it might be a waste product they can't get hold of.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. But I have to finish with a plug. I am sponsored by CMP, who I don't think they supply to the US. You can check if you're listening from the US, but I'm not sure they do. But it's good for me because I've been sponsored by companies that aren't UK based, and there's supply chain issues, funnily enough, and it always just isn't a good time. Whereas these guys are UK based, and you can get 15% off. And I'm glad they gave me a 15% off code, because I've been given like 5% off, and I'm like, fucking 5% off is such a like. You don't even notice 5%. No. Whereas 15 is like, oh, I actually feel like I can give something back. So you can use Steve 15 if you want to get 15% off. I might get a kickback if I make enough sales.
Why isn't it Steve 20?
Steve. Well, I just put Steve and see how high you can go with the number, and they might just it might just work to get you more percentage off. That'll be good. Yeah. So wait, where did 20? Well, 20. Did 20 come from somewhere, or were you just like, why not 20?
I was just like making immature jokes. So.
Because I know Steve 90 was always my like username on like loads of different.
And everyone was like, "This can't be true."
1990. That's I'm a 1990 baby. That's where that came from.
I was just listening to, who was it? Where did I listen to it? Someone was just saying like, "Oh, the 90s were the best," and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, man, I was living through the 90s. I can't really recall that it was so great. And I think it's just like the golden age fallacy that you always then remember back and think like, yeah that was the best time, right? Especially the time where you lived through and where you were a little bit younger. I can't really recall the 90s that much, to be honest. Of course, there are certain things, but nothing that I would relate to the decade there.
I've got one. Dragon Ball Z. was that in the 90s? Or was it 80s?
No, in the UK. No, it must have. Yeah, no, it must have been in the 90s. For sure. Late 90s, at least in Germany, because I was already like 13 then when 2000 hit. And I know that it must have been before that I watched Dragon Ball Z. So it must have been like 1998 or so. Yeah, in Germany at least.
Of course, the late 90s, not the early 90s. That wouldn't make any sense. I'd be like just a baby.
I mean, Dragon Ball Z is quite old already.
Oh, it is, yeah.
But when it arrived in Germany, and also I would assume in UK, it was probably then late 90s.
I'm still surprised how many people just like I think in like people around our age who are into bodybuilding, they either like love and adore Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball the franchise, or they've just never, ever watched it and never heard of it at all, and they do not understand it one bit. I never find people who are very much in the middle. And I think it's basically, if they've been exposed to it, you're going to love it because it's fucking cool shit. Whereas if you've never been exposed to it, you're just like, God, these guys are such geeks and losers. Like watching this like cartoon guy go like, Kamehameha.
Yeah, I don't know. Because most of the time you're also there kind of moving and living in your own small little bubble, because whenever I'm posting something about anime, the people who are posting or messaging me back are the ones who are into anime as well. Yeah. And probably there are so many people watching that story and just like exiting or swiping further because they just think like, what's the shit? All right. So I think you only get the confirmation from the people that are attracted to stuff like that as well. And it gives you then a full sense of, I don't know, security and impression that everyone is actually into it. When in reality, it's just like a very, very minor thing. Yeah. Minor part.
I asked, who was it? There was a few people who just, one of my clients, he's a bit younger than us though. He's just started watching it. He's like, man, I'm hooked, which I enjoy when I get my clients hooked onto the cartoon or the anime.
Homework for every one of your athletes. So, like,
and then
you
Greg
want motivation? Watch Dragon Ball Z.
Watched it, so I was like,
did he start?
He said he's going to watch it to like, I don't know. For me, basically.
He's way too intellectual for that. He would constantly question everything like, what is this chamber about? What's the sense behind it? That doesn't make any kind of sense from a physics perspective.
Yeah,
stuff
I know
like that.
What you mean. So, yeah, that's the big news this week, I guess, is that sponsorship opportunity, which is cool because CMP had been around for a long time in the UK and they also sponsored the WMBF. Which is awesome, that partnership. So I'm glad to be part of that. And may mean I have to go to some shows, which is a good thing because I enjoy going to shows as well. And especially by the WMBF because they do a fantastic job, at least from last year. So that's exciting. Any big news on your end apart from Actually, let's talk through, we've probably talked about it before, but how are you approaching this holiday in terms of training, nutrition, but also work? People will be interested.
So first and foremost, I just want to say that big news are probably the events that are happening in the world at the moment, the tragic events. But of course, because it's a fitness podcast and we would be way outside of our scope, I think it's fair to say that we are not going to touch on that and talk about it. I just wanted to bring it up so that it's not like as if we are ignorant about what is going on in the world right now. I think that we are very well aware of that, very much following along. And I think, though, it's appropriate for us then to not talk about it instead of touching on it.
Which is why I didn't talk about it.
Yeah. It's just like, I just didn't want to come across as being ignorant when we are then saying like, yeah, the big news got a sponsor now, right? When in reality, there are just those horrible things happening in the world.
Bigger news in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to bring it up, right? So yeah, with that being said, in regards to holiday, so this is the last week then of my mesocycle. I'm overreaching right now. Had the second to last session now. Tomorrow's the last session with my lower body. I'm going to push it real hard. And then afterwards, it's like for like 10 days, not going to do any kind of training at all. So it's kind of active rest, especially because I will be on the slope like each and every single day from morning to nighttime, being quite active overall. And I'm not stressing about it, to be honest, because I do my due diligence when it matters. I'm ticking off all of the boxes when it matters. And then when the time comes where I may pull back because of whatever reason for things such as sickness, illness, or actually going on holiday where I don't have access to the gym, then I just accept it. And it's not a big deal. Like 10 days is nothing in the grand scheme of like 10 years, for example. And I always bring it up for my athletes as well. If you really have a long time frame and you are really interested in making a change in terms of your body composition, then you have to assume that you're probably going to need to do it for the next 5 to 10 years at least. If you then think about this, 10 years is 520 weeks in total. If then 1 week, let's say, you're not training at all, is that really going to make that much of a difference? Of 520 weeks? Absolutely not, right? And let's just then extrapolate it even further. Let's just say it's even more weeks, right? Even if it's like ending up being 20 weeks in 10 years. 20 weeks in and for itself sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things around like 520 weeks, it's nothing really, right? Nothing. And then you can actually fall back and be way more relaxed about it. And I see it like this. I will probably come back fresh, recovered, motivated to go back at it and push hard again. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't even, like it's 3 days longer than a deload. So it's like you needed the deload anyway. So it kind of just falls nicely. And like you said, you're just going to be more recovered coming back.
And I know that this is something that you have been struggling with in the past, and me, myself as well. There was a long time where I didn't allow myself to actually take some time away from the gym because I thought that something is happening. I don't know what, right? I could never really back it up with kind of facts, but still I was anxious to not go into the gym. So I was whenever I was going on a holiday, I was always picking places where there's a gym nearby and stuff like that. And in the end, is that really so important? Absolutely not, right? And also it once again comes back to what it is that we have been talking about so often over the past couple of months. Knowledge and experience kind of cures anxiety, and it kind of ties into time cures anxiety overall. So the more and the longer you've been doing something for, the more relaxed you get, because you can kind of measure those things and prioritize certain things as well. And you can basically put a batch on it and know, like, okay, it doesn't really matter. It's quite cheap, and let's push it to the side, right? Whereas in the past, everything was just like either the greatest thing on earth or the worst thing. There was nothing in between. And right now it's just like, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm supposed to be doing it. I'm thinking about those things when it matters. And then there are times where I just, once again, take a step away from that and be cool with that. And I know that this has no detrimental or harmful impact on me unless I'm going to break an arm. That's, of course, something that would impact things negatively. And you've heard it a couple of times already from people who went onto a snowboard trip, first day, broken arm.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews, and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description.
Yeah, it's one of those where I'm almost like, for people like us, a lot of the listeners, if you get for the individual getting slight anxiety about taking more time off than maybe they planned, it's probably more beneficial for you to actually take that time off than not to. Yeah. Like for us, me being like you said, I find it hard to leave the gym. Like if I was just kind of taking a week off the gym and I was just at home doing my usual work, I'd be like, it's part of my routine. I need to go in and do something.
Okay, whereas, I can see that.
Yeah,
that's
if
for
I'm
sure.
on holiday, perfect.
Yeah,
you're just taken away from it. But I've also done like you said there, and I've picked and chosen, and I've gone out of my way to try and go to gyms. And sometimes it's cool because it's like a cool gym or whatever, and that's cool. But sometimes it's just like I'm just doing it for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. Yeah. Actually, just probably benefit more from just de-stressing.
You've put it very well, and I think that there is definitely a time and a place for it. So when I was in New York, I was there by myself. That was in 2014, and I mean, New York, there's so many gyms there. So why wouldn't I go and train there and pick and choose like different gyms, gain a little bit of kind of, I don't know, the taste and smell for different gyms, because that's cool, right? Using also different equipment, or the way that you did it in Las Vegas, being around other bodybuilders, checking out Dragon Slayer, stuff like that. That is amazing, right? But if you do it for the wrong reasons, because basically you're just afraid of losing things, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. And especially for me personally, I'm now going on an activity trip, an activity holiday. So I will be quite active the entire day. And during the time where I'm not by myself on the slope, I want to spend time with my family. And it's not that I'm then getting up early in the morning before of a day of full-on activity to then get in a training session at a shitty hotel gym or so. It's simply not worth it, the hassle, right? So yes, there are definitely times and places for it, but always know that it's for the right reasons instead of the wrong reasons. And also on that note, Steve, I even am going that far now with a lot of my athletes. When I know that they are the people who have a hard time going easy in a deload, I then tell them like, okay, in that instance, if you feel like you can't hit the gym without actually going too hard, I rather want you to not go to the gym at all.
100%. Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that. It's actually brought up a really random memory. There might be a video on the YouTube where I talk about this, where basically I say, like, for that individual that can't take it easy in the gym, like, don't go to the gym. And this was actually from a Lyle McDonald article on body recomposition, where he was talking about, like, I think deloading or something. And I can specifically remember it.
Stolen stuff from yeah. Lyle McDonald.
I'm calling you out, Pascal.
Yeah.
But you're completely right. And I think that's why a lot of, like, the higher intensity, lower volume crowd take a week off because it's like they can't, or they do now, they do their D-volume, right? Because they're like, I'm going to go to the gym and train hard. Have you heard of D-volume weeks?
No.
You haven't heard of these?
No.
Okay. So basically, it's their way of deloading. They're not calling it a deload because they're not deloading. They're still keeping the load high and their relative intensity is still like failure, but they just do like one set, for example. So they do a D-volume week. I'm not completely convinced by it. I haven't tried it myself, but I know in a deload week, I ain't wanting to go to like failure. It's just fuck that. I don't even want to go to the gym really, but I kind of do.
No. So we can touch on that really quickly. So for me personally, the purpose of a deload is twofold. To basically bring down the fatigue as much as you can. By that, prepare yourself then for the next mesocycle. So bringing down fatigue, and by that, preparing yourself for the next meso. So a kind of two purposes behind it. And when we are then still training, it serves also there two purposes. For me personally, it is to maintain some of the neurological and technical adaptations and to possibly aid recovery due to blood flow. However, in order to accomplish that, we need to go light, very, very light. Right? And if you go too heavy, you don't get anything of either of those two worlds because you're probably not training hard enough or with a sufficient amount of volume, so you're not generating enough of a hypertrophic stimulus to make it worth of actually training then. But if you're still training too heavy, you're also not reaping the rewards of then actually the purpose of a deload. And then you're just like in that level in between, and you go into the next mesocycle and it will probably suck. And if that mesocycle didn't suck, then probably at some point it will. And that's why, of course, there are many ways to go about it. Even in my deload presentation, I've talked about it, that there are many, many ways of going about deload. The main purpose is to bring fatigue levels down. And I don't know whether still training to like failure and just reducing the volume is enough to mitigate the accumulated fatigue.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because they keep volume relatively low anyway, so it's like possibly they don't accumulate as much fatigue from the volume. I'm still not a huge fan of that. And also one of the aspects of deloading I like is like the psychological break of training hard. Like it's nice, touchy, it kind of is nice and isn't nice at the same time. It's kind of like I need a week where I'm going kind of easy and the session should feel easy and like, what the fuck am I doing here in the gym type of thing, so that I'm like, wow, like I am refueled, ready to train hard for many, many weeks. And because those guys in that sort of crowd, I guess, are relative intensity is like super through the roof and they don't even bring it down during a deload week. I'm like, my head would just be like, what? Like you just full of anxiety all the time, just like absolutely balls out, have to progress no matter what. I don't know. I'm sure they could come up with a different number of arguments. And I guess with hypertrophy training, you can say the biggest kind of contributor to fatigue is volume. So if you bring down that element, you're really seeing a big fatigue reduction. But I'm with you. Like if you're training like keeping loads super high the whole time and really close to failure, like you are damaging muscle tissue to a high extent. Also joints, ligaments, those sort of tissues, they're not going to get any recovery. I'm certainly not going to go into week one of my mesocycle in the freshest and best state where I'm going to perform my best. I can't see that. It doesn't make sense to me, apart from maybe for the psychological purposes of this person can't switch off and they need to go to the gym because, like you said, if they can't switch off from training hard, don't go. You're going to reap a lot of the rewards from just a normal like deload that we would prescribe. So,
of course, when a person who is doing something like that isn't around, it's not fair to then make some statements about what their purpose is behind it or their intention is behind it. That's why, of course, it's not fair, right, to actually make any kind of judgments or give our opinion on the matter because we probably lack the context behind it, and it would be fair then to hear them out. To me, just from the current perspective, from the little knowledge or the little context that is provided to me, it just sounds like more of a justification of still training hard, but needing actually a rest time and putting any kind of fancy terminology on it, so to speak.
That's the way I see it. Because it's like we've said, the purpose behind the deload is to do nothing but reduce fatigue and maintain fitness as best as possible, which is like the technique and neurological characteristics there. And I can't see training exercises to failure or a very close proximity, an overloading nature to make sense. Is actually purposely meant to be an underloading week. Like you're not meant to be overloading. And if you're bringing volume that far down, it's like you said, if you're bringing volume that far down, you're not even doing enough volume for hypertrophy. So why are you now training like as if you're trying to grow? And then my only logical conclusion to go to, given those parameters, is like you said, it's just a justification again not to train light. And it's kind of like that person that can't, I don't know, go out for a meal because they're like, no, I have to have all my food at home and track and weigh everything. It's like, no, you can't. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go to restaurants that provide macros, or I don't know. It's like, it's very inflexible and you can't kind of pull back.
And I mean, then it's always like if you were to challenge then their views, and the same goes probably for Ross as well in many instances. Often the argument that comes back is like, you wouldn't get it, or
I hate those.
You're too weak to understand, or something like that, right? Which is a very unintellectual and lazy argument or statement to make. Anyway, if someone though has been doing that, of course, right, and is listening to this and feels like as if we are talking about that individual, my DMs are always open, and I'm more than willing to hear those individuals out. Like, honestly, I could be absolutely wrong, and that is something that holds true to everything in life. Don't surround yourself with the people you agree with most of the time, but surround yourself, or at least listen to those people who you disagree with, because this is way more enlightening than just being in your small bubble that just confirms your biases and your viewpoints. That doesn't get you any kind of further. And it just creates that echo chamber most of the time that you feel comfortable in, of course, right? Because it's nice to just be confirmed that you're right with your beliefs. But maybe you're completely wrong. And that's why I always also like to listen to other people who I disagree with, and still also follow some of those individuals over on Instagram, because, hey, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm doing something completely wrong. And even those things that I disagree on, if I can't put some valid arguments against those things in a very logical manner with backed up facts, then I may be the one who's wrong, right? So you always kind of want to steelman their arguments instead of strawman them.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And that's why we kind of tried to frame what we're arguing against versus necessarily what exactly they're doing, because we don't actually know. It's like, I don't know, someone will write me a question and be like, what do you think of Jordan Peters' style of training or something? And I'm like, well, I don't know his program. I can only base it off what I see and hear. So I'm not going to attack Jordan's specific program. I'm going to attack what I think it is. And so I'm kind of still manning a different, I can't still man it. So I'm like trying to make a different argument and forget the person. And like you kind of mentioned, it's never personal. It's always about like the people, the ideas that people are providing. Like Eric Helms and Mike Israetel, they aren't attacking one another, even though sometimes people might interpret it like that. They're attacking that person's ideas, which is like, and they're fine for that. And there's nothing personal necessarily. Well, it shouldn't be personal to that. I can see how it could become that. But I love because you often see it. I think it's in the fitness industry. It's quite a strong idea to keep your circle tight and like block out the haters or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to understand some people aren't haters, and you can have different opinions and ideas and still be friends. You can still be bodybuilders. You can learn from one another to ultimately further the industry rather than have like camps, which is, I'm sure people will put us inside of a camp, and maybe we are somewhat in some ways, but we do try and be open-minded. And like you said there, I am the same way. I still follow people who I don't fundamentally agree with everything they do, but there's little bits of information that they put out sometimes, and I'm like, I could apply that in my sort of methodologies, and let's maybe try that. And certainly there's been times where I've been like, oof, like, don't know, for example, like N1 and Kasim. Initially I was like, oof. And then slowly I was like, they're saying some things. And Kasim started to be a bit more, I think, nuanced with some of the ways he was talking about things, and less like black and white with some statements potentially, or at least he voiced that better and communicated it better and how he intended it. And so I understood it better. And then I tried some stuff. And I was like, actually, some of this stuff I do like. And so it's a case of like I could have just left him and be like, nah, like, block, like, ignore, biomechanics fucking sucks completely. And slowly, like, some of it I'm like, yeah, some of it. There's some of it, not all of it, but I can take on board some things. And I think it's the same with like the all out train to failure crowd. I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you have a point here, and maybe I'll take some of it. And you do that enough with people, and you come to your own methodologies, which I think is where you're ultimately talking about as well.
No, absolutely. And unfortunately, and this is also generally the case in every kind of industry, the voices that kind of are the loudest are most of the time the ones that are being heard the most. And it's not always the best, because people are drawn to controversial topics and to extreme kind of approaches. And you can see it in media, you can see it on social media with other things as well. If you take a neutral stance, you're most of the time not really being heard, right? It's like you have to attack someone, and you have to be quite aggressive in the way that you're writing, the way that you're talking. And that kind of resonates with people because it hits them in their feelings. And when you can actually then grab their emotions, people are quite vulnerable, even though that they don't notice. But if you trigger emotions, people can actually get quite nasty, but also quite lovely at the same time. Why do we see it right now in the world that people are actually then very much willing to help, like a lot, right? And no one asked them for that. So it gets out the worst and the best in people when you trigger kind of emotions.
Yeah, people, I think you've said this before, humans, and I can see it in myself as well, like to be part of like camps and communities. So, I guess you can call it a community. That sounds better than a camp. But then you don't want to shoehorn yourself. But it's also hard then in the fitness industry, for example, like us. I see us very much like you could say we're on the fence. I don't necessarily say we're on the fence. You could see us like in the middle, and you don't really like put yourself in one box. It's like, I see that as a real positive thing, but sometimes it doesn't look as like, I don't know, people are like, but I think this, and they're not necessarily all the way with this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because we're trying to get the best outcomes, and that's probably taking a mix of everything. So I don't know. It's we're never going to change in that respect.
No, absolutely not.
We're going to sell ketones, and we're going to be low carb, high fat. Let's go.
How are things on your end, Steve? Training, nutrition?
So training wise, good. Like I said to you, I think we may have said it on the podcast, like once you got that foundational week, like the first week of the mesocycle done, like every week thereafter just kind of runs a little bit more smoothly, because I'm like, I don't have to think so much. I'm just like, let's beat it by a little bit of a rep, a little bit of load. Let's auto-regulate training volume and things. I am finding, I don't know if I'm due a lower volume period at some point, because I haven't really had one for quite a long time, because I didn't really take one after my show in Vegas. I kind of just, like you said, toured gyms, and I didn't do that much actually. I did kind of only did like a couple of sets and things, but probably still enough of an amount not to be like a low volume. So maybe I'm due one of those at some point, because I'm finding I'm needing quite a lot, and I am able to recover from quite a lot of training volume at the moment. So that's happening, but I feel good. I'm feeling good. No, like I have little niggles in my shoulder, which I've talked about a little bit here, but nothing too bad. So training's going pretty well. I am actually, just after talking to Mike yesterday, I'd been thinking about it for a little bit, where I hit some good numbers on the straight leg deadlift. I think I may have even said like a couple of weeks ago, like I hit a PR. I've just been like, the amount of fatigue I'm getting from this and the amount of stimulus I'm getting from this is not in a good place. And I don't think it's because the movement's becoming stale. I think because I've had a slight technique alteration, or maybe my technique isn't quite as good as it could be. I think basically my knees are getting a little too bent as I'm coming down, and that's allowing me to recruit lots more glute and like lower back. And that is where I'm feeling quite a bit of the stimulus. I still feel it in my hamstrings, but I'm just like, I don't get that like gnarly soreness in my hamstrings. I haven't had that for a while from straight leg deadlifts. So I'm like, I feel like I should. So this week I'm going to scale that lift back, and I'm going to really focus on like driving my hips back, keeping them high, trying to arch my lower back and keep my knees soft, but not as bent as they were getting to, and see if then I get a bit better stimulus in the hamstrings. It's always hard because you're ever chasing like, I want to progress load and make sure I'm hitting like PRs in the long run, but I also have to take care of, is the stimulus there? And I think as you become more advanced, that gets even harder because you grow even slower and you progress even slower. So you don't want to take steps, what you feel like are steps backwards. But if it's going to drive a better stimulus, I just need to eat my ego and be like, right, Steve, like you just need to take like 10% off, see if you get a bit of stimulus. If you have like fucked up hamstrings the next day, you probably did like a lot in your favor for a better stimulus. So that is one thing I'm going to rectify within my training. Otherwise, everything else is pretty golden at the moment.
Yeah, this is also something that is not commonly, but often even being reported by some of the athletes, probably also in your roster, that when they are in a deload, they are reporting that they are actually getting a much, much bigger amount of soreness and stimulus in certain muscle groups. And this is a key indicator that probably your technique isn't as great as you think it is throughout the mesocycle. You're probably using too much load, and you would benefit from actually reducing the load.
That's a really good, really, really good. I've particularly seen this with like RDL, like hip hinges in particular.
Yeah.
And actually it makes me reflect upon what I just said there, because I didn't find when I deloaded it to be better. I'm still going to try it just to see, because I think it's always worth trying. And maybe it's just, maybe the movement is becoming stale, or maybe I'm doing everything I can be for it, and it's just, that's how it is. Soreness isn't like the be all and end all, absolutely. So yeah, I'll see. It's tomorrow, so I'll see how that goes. But everything else, I'm really pleased with how things are moving. I'm feeling good. Body weight was really weird. It's like you mentioned, I think last week, where you kind of were kind of a bit stable, and then just suddenly you shot up. And I had this. So in my deload, I actually dropped quite a bit of weight, which sometimes happens because of stress, water retention. So I thought my weight would come right back up in the first week of my mesocycle. It didn't. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to push my food up. So, and I think I mentioned that to stay on top of it. And then suddenly, like a couple of days ago, I hit 185 pounds. And I was like, oh. And now the last like 3 days have been the same weight. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it's actually good. It feels a bit uncomfortable at first because it's like, oh, that was a big rush up on weight, like 2 pounds. But that's where I want to be in terms of like my rate of gain long term. Yeah. And it just reinforces why you should have like a big bird's eye view on kind of cutting and gaining phases. Like you can't expect to be perfect every week, but just keep tinkering and small adjustments. So yeah, my food's up at 3,800 calories or so.
Boy, oh boy.
It's not a struggle.
Every single time that you're saying that, I'm just like, oh man. I was just, so funny enough, I had one athlete this week. It's a female, smaller individual. It's just the unfortunate nature of being a smaller female individual. You simply, it's not fair. Let's put it that way. If you really think about it, it isn't fair. If you end up at around 15 to 1,600 calories and you're already gaining weight at that caloric intake, it's not fair. It isn't, right? And I basically said like, okay, we can either complain about it, take a look at other people, believe them of what it is that they are reporting about what it is that they eat, because she was then saying like, yeah, I take a look around, take a look at social media. They are reporting that they are eating like 2,000 calories. They are even losing weight at that caloric intake. And I was just like, either we can believe that, whether this is truly the case, or we can just like accept that other people have just maybe a higher caloric intake than you, but there are probably other people who have a lower intake than you, and we can't change anything about it. And I was then bringing up you, Steve, right? I was saying like, okay, Steve is a little bit younger than I am. He has more muscle mass than I have as well, but that discrepancy of muscle mass doesn't really equate to that caloric expenditure, because we know that, yes, having or carrying more muscle mass expends more energy, but it's not a lot. This is not a lot. Unless you're now 20 kilograms of more muscle mass, then it may become a little bit more significant, but that is kind of not the case with us, right? We are the same height, and I myself, I'm also active. I have like 10 to 15,000 steps on a daily basis most of the time. This doesn't change. I'm training 6 times per week, and you are a little bit more active than I am, a little bit younger, carrying a little bit more muscle mass. But does that really then equate to like a 1,500 kcal maintenance difference? Hell no, right? Is it then kind of unfair to some extent? You could make the argument, or you can just like accept that it is that way, that there are just individual differences, and that you may have times where you're struggling as well with other things of maybe getting in the food, as other people are struggling with keeping the calories down because their caloric intake is so low, right? But this is a perfect example. We are nearly on the same height with everything, and yet you consume or need to consume so much more calories than I am. And of course, you could be kind of surprised by that, or just take it as it is, that it is just individual. This is what individual differences look like.
It's a great example because we are like very, very similar. The differences are absolutely marginal with us, yet the differences in our kind of caloric needs are like significant, like completely significant. So, and it doesn't really make sense on paper, and that is just genetics. And I think I'm more towards the bell curve of like spendthrift, whereas you're more thrifty with your metabolism. Yep. And that's what it is. And like you said, like there's pros and cons to both, and there'd be pros and cons to other elements of your genetics. It's like having, I don't know, I have big arms, for example, you have sweeping quads. It's like, fuck, why can't we be put together and like have the best of both worlds? That'd be amazing.
Transformer style.
Exactly.
We should actually then become kind of a Power Ranger, buddy. We are kind of coming up with 3 other people, and we kind of merge together, and only the best body parts are actually then being put onto that power. What is it called? That massive mega Power
Megatron,
Ranger.
is that it? No, it's not Megatron. No. I don't know. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.